Well, I can remember back to like around the age of 5. Back then I felt like it was normal because it was the only thing that I knew. I had 2 older brothers that are 8 and 10 years older than me, and so it was kind of like I was an only child. But both of my parents, as far back as I can remember, were drug addicts and alcoholics. Like, I was told before I even started school that if I talked about the things that happened at home, I would be taken to a bad place. And even though I didn't know what I wasn't supposed to talk about, I just knew I couldn't talk about anything that happened at home. Then I started being sexually abused by a neighbor around the age of 5. And my parents knew about it, but they didn't do anything about it because they were afraid of the police coming in, because they not only did drugs, but they sold them, and so they were all over our house. But then my dad had a stroke that left him disabled when I was 9, and it was after that that my mom got involved in more drugs and started going out to the bars, and I would go with her. It was called Blue Jeans Lounge or something. And a lot of times if I was with her, she would just leave me in the car. And there were some times when she would come out and leave with somebody else, and so then I had to walk home in the middle of the night by myself. Like, nobody would be home for a couple of days to a couple of weeks at a time, and I would just be there by myself. And then she would start stealing stuff for money for drugs, and then she eventually started prostituting herself for her drugs. I went with her one time because I didn't want to stay at home because I never knew when she was coming back. And so I was with her, and her drug dealer offered her a $10 piece of crack for me instead of for her. I even asked her why she did it, and she said, because now I can get what I want and I don't have to do anything. After the first time I was sold, it happened more on a regular basis, to where she would either take me to her drug dealer, or he would come and get me either from the house or from the bus stop, and he would take and sell me to other people, probably a couple times a week. And in that time, I got pregnant twice and was given 2 abortions. I watched 2 people be murdered who tried to help me. I would ask my teachers for detention so that I wouldn't have to go home right after school, because I never knew if he was going to pick me up from the bus stop or if my mom was going to be home. It was bad, but I would have done anything to make my mom want me.
What is the risk of an adolescent being trafficked? Studies have shown that every 7 youth online will receive sexual solicitation or approach over the internet.
Children are being groomed. So what does that look like, online? That looks like, whether it is a video game or some kind of open chat room, these predators reach out, they make a contact with a child, and they slowly but surely start to build a friendship, to the point where that friendship then turns into somewhat like a trusting relationship online. Predator will always try to make those emotional connections to build that trust and friendship. Then they start to isolate. Then they want to try to seek some kind of photos and passing back and forth of things like that. And then the threats come in of, well, if you don't send me more or do this, I'm going to tell your family and your friends, or I'm going to harm your family and friends. I know who you are. I know where you live. I know how old you are. I know what school you go to. And they feel trapped. I have seen instances where the grandma trafficked the mom, and now the granddaughter or my client is now being trafficked. Familial trafficking is very prevalent in that generational trauma. I see that a lot.
Children are trafficked by family or relatives the most, around 41%. And there are a couple of things to factor into that number. If we know that a child has been trafficked by a family member, they are often in a place where they are being removed from their home. usually going into foster care. Most studies will verify that once a child has been trafficked, there is a higher chance of that child returning to that life or being recruited again. Furthermore, if a child has not been previously trafficked but is in foster care, they are usually more vulnerable and often in a place where they might be recruited.
I mean, they're exposed, and predators, traffickers, they know this, so they will prey upon those vulnerabilities. Typically, there's some generational trauma where the child simply grows up in the environment full of vulnerabilities, and then they're preyed upon. A lot of kids, I believe 70% of kids in foster care at one point are or will be trafficked.
I'm Jerry Haig. I'm the CEO of One More Child, and One More Child, incredible organization since 1904. There's a group of community members and came together to be able to say, we've got to help children that have been orphaned. But the needs of children changed, and so not so many were physically orphaned, but they were socially orphaned. And so today, how many children have a parent who either cannot or will not care for them? 10 years ago, get a text from then Secretary of Department of Children and Families saying, we need a safe home for child victims of sex trafficking, will you do it? And I simply texted back and said yes, not knowing the ramifications of a simple answer to a complex problem. But that launched us opening the very first licensed safe home for child victims of sex trafficking in the state of Florida. It opened the opportunity for One More Child to be able to influence the development of those best practices and the policies and the statutes and pieces around caring for victims of child sex trafficking.
I've seen everything from a baby be rescued to everything in between to a young adult. And we've seen statistically one healthy adult relationship changes everything. When you look at case by case, if you're just talking about child by child, if they have one healthy, what we would, all of us would consider a healthy adult relationship, their chances of being trafficked just drop tremendously. So those foster parents can be that one healthy, and it changes everything.
When we look at foster care and that connection point with human trafficking, it's almost like a ball of yarn that's wound around itself, and foster care and economic mobility and housing and child hunger and all of these different components just touch each other in so many different ways. And so that if we can come in and provide stable housing for a single mom, if we can provide job training skills, if we can provide stable food for that home, then we're able to prevent child trafficking or young adult trafficking from taking place. And so all of these different components are so closely knitted together, and we can be able to impact human trafficking from a foster care standpoint, a single mom standpoint, a prevention, an economic mobility, and a job training standpoint.
The family unit is a major piece of the puzzle to prevent human trafficking. But the other piece greatly involves the community.
Everyone in the community, I think, should be kind of aware of human trafficking because it is so in and out everywhere. People need to feel that they can do something. We can give information and give information, but if a person doesn't necessarily feel that they're going to make a difference, then they might think, well, I can't make a difference, I'm just one person. But if we get people to understand that they literally can be the one person that saves a child's life or completely changes for the better the trajectory of a child's life.
Outside of the family unit, schools where students interact daily with administrators and teachers are another large influential part of the equation. So the state of Florida decided to do something about it.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Ellen Bogdanoff, and I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. Today, we are pleased to launch an awareness campaign to help educate teens and young adults about the dangers of exploitation and human trafficking called I Am Invaluable.
You You.
You.
You are not a commodity.
You are not the property of someone.
You are not the property of someone, an object for others to use.
You are invaluable.
Though you may be hurting, please know that you are not dirty.
No one has the right to force you to that line and hold you high for others to scorn.
You are human. You are precious. You are someone.
You have a purpose.
You have a name.
You have a worth that no one can break or take away.
You are not merely valuable, because value rises and falls.
Now say it.
Say it.
I am invaluable.
I am invaluable.
I am invaluable.
In the fall of 2022, Florida Alliance helped launch a campaign called I Am Invaluable to provide educational resources around child recruitment and human trafficking to schools, students, and parents.
Earlier this year, during the legislative session, I was proud to champion increased funding for human trafficking awareness and education. The teenage years of life can sometimes be challenging, as I'm sure many of you know. So I'm proud to support this effort by the Florida Alliance to provide factual information to our youth.
We think of human trafficking as something that is far away, that doesn't affect us in our daily lives, but the truth is that human trafficking is everywhere, and it is important that our students are aware of the signs of human trafficking, of the things that they can do, the measures they can take to prevent it.
The movement behind I Am Invaluable is the unified rally cry that human beings are not a commodity. They are not to be sold, owned, or exploited. It is realizing that every individual is unique and above value or cost. It is an invitation to safety for those who are currently victimized by others, and is a promise for justice.
We all need to be invested in three ways. The first way is enforcement. The second way is recovery. And then that third area is prevention. So that enforcement piece, we need to support law enforcement in their efforts against child sex trafficking, young adult trafficking, human trafficking, to be involved in seeing something and saying something. So if we see something that we think is suspect, we don't know, we're not experts, call law enforcement, let them know, let them do their job. And then that second area is being able to provide recovery services, to be able to help them with job placement, be able to help them with stable housing, to be able to provide them with food, to be able to come alongside in all of those different areas of recovery type services. And then that last one is prevention. We have got to press into prevention so that no child, no young adult is ever victimized by child sex trafficking, by human trafficking ever again. They have adults that are looking in and they're able to be a part of their lives and to know that that child, that young adult is forever safe.